Hello and welcome to the first JB Arts tutorial. This video will cover the basic use of Clonestamp tool. This is used to remove artifacts in images or unwanted elements of a composition. If I pick up the brush tool by clicking B here, I can start highlighting some of the problems that we've got with this composition. First of all, we have this buoy that's floating in the ocean. It's a bit distracting. We've got this photobombing seagull sat here that's in the way. And then there's these splotches that are in the sky, which are probably caused by a splash that's on the lens from the surf. These will need to be removed to make this image less distracting, and I will show you how. First of all, if we step backwards so that we can get rid of the red marks, which don't really improve the quality of the image at all, we will pick up the Clonestamp tool so I can show you the basics of how you can get rid of it. So either hovering your mouse over where the clone stamp is, or by hitting the keyboard shortcut S, you'll pick up the tool. To show you what it does, you first need to pick up some source pixels in the image. So if I hold down Alt, which enables me, you can see the cursor has changed. It enables me now to choose where I'm sampling the source images or the source pixels from in the image. So if I click on the bride's eye and move over here, if I enlarge the cursor for you, you'll see that I have the bride's eye and then any pixels that are around it, depending upon the size of the cursor I'm using. And wherever I place the final location of the cursor will start pasting in proportion to where that first pixel started. You can see the closer I am to the actual bride's head, the more the pixels line up until they almost look perfect. And then when I start moving away, the cloning of the image will start distorting where it's going on. If I start clicking down right now and painting, then you can see that it will pick up all of the pixels until it reaches the end of the image, and it will clone them accordingly until you have a mirror of where you started from. Undoing that, and making that cursor smaller, we can demonstrate that we can pick up an area that's next to one of the splotches. So if we take this one in the sky, if we pick up, as an example, too deep or too light a colour that's too far away from the source that we're trying to replicate, as we paint over it, you can see that it's far too bright a sky and it's far too obvious. The exact same will happen in opposite. If we pick it up from the sky that's too dark above, then it'll paint it really dark and it won't work. So the better way of doing that is to pick up pixels that are really close to the image you want to, or the part of the image you want to replace, and then painting over it with those pixels instead. Now that's done a fairly good job. It's picked up a little bit here that isn't quite right, so if I pick up another sample next to it, you can get rid of it, and that effectively works. To do this better, there's another tiny bit there once I sat back. To do this better, you don't want to paint over everything with 100% opacity, which leaves a hard edge. If, for example, I choose the area that's next to where the cloud is, when I pick up, the computer isn't working, when I pick up the source image, and then paste over, you'll see that there's this very strong edge where the cloud is being obscured there, and the harshness of that makes it look completely wrong. Undoing that, picking up a similar sort of sample image to the side, but now dropping your opacity down to around 20, you can start painting over the top of the image you want to get rid of, while then working your way through, picking up parts of the cloud as well so that you can bring that back over the top and you can start obscuring what's going on without creating that same harsh edge as was there before. This way you can paint over multiple different times. The opacity will make sure that it blends the image more subtly in, and eventually you can get rid of the object that was the problem, looking a lot more natural. As you step back away from that side of the image by zooming it out, once the computer actually does what I tell it to. It's a lot harder to see where that sample image was, where the problem with the defect was. Now, there is another tool that I'm going to show you at this point which can make this job a lot easier and a lot smoother and a lot quicker. There are problems with the alternative, and I'll try to point them out to you now, but first of all I'll show you what the advantages of them are. So rather than needing for you to use a low opacity and blend in those surrounding pixels yourself, Photoshop can use this tool, which is the spot healing brush, and by using that tool it will cast a grey area over the top of the object you want to get rid of, and then it'll use its content aware algorithms to calculate how much it needs to remove that base image. So by painting the grey box over the top and now letting go, you'll see that it's completely removed the object that was the problem. Here is another example. Here is another. We can go over to the other side of the image and it can show you these blotches too. Now, this example is perfect because there's a fairly gentle gradient into the sky and it's a pretty solid colour. The blue gradient is quite simple for the computer to deal with, and so it does the correction very well. It's really difficult to see that anything has happened in terms of an edit into the sky at this point. It looks quite convincing. When the background pattern becomes more complicated, the algorithm can start to fall down. So we can probably get away with the way that the pixels change with the boy because the background's quite plain here. So if I hover over the top of the boy and then disappear, you can see that there's a slight edge going on and a slight radius. If I undo that and reduce the size of the cursor and focus more on the boy and just the edge of the boy, so once that's completely covered, now there's a less obvious mark because of the way that the boy, how small it was and how little there is around it. If you wanted to pick up your Clonestamp tool by pressing S and using the same opacity rules that we were doing earlier on, but with a smaller cursor, you can clean up that edge really quite quickly. You can pick up some of the darker lines here and paint back over them. By the time that you've done 2 or 3 passes, it'll be really difficult for you to see, especially when zoomed out, that anything has occurred down here. If we zoom into the seagull, you're going to notice a little clearer that it's not quite so smooth. By picking up your spot healing tool and working around the edge of the seagull here, you'll note that I'm going from the sea over the surf and the sand with the seagull. Now that's where it causes the problem, because Photoshop's algorithm doesn't deal with that surf very well. It's not too simple for it to understand what it is that is going on with the image and how it needs to replace those pixels. So if we wait for the processor just to catch up with what I've indicated with the cursor to see whether it's covered all of the seagull before I let go. It's caught, have we got everything? Yeah, a little bit here by the looks of it. Okay, so now I can let go with the cursor. You'll see Photoshop starts doing its thinking and then it starts removing. Now, if you look closely, there is a line here where the pixels haven't worked. And there's a line here too where it looks as if something's gone on with the photo manipulation work. And the surf is a bit blurry here and doesn't look so clean. So alternatively, you can do one of 2 things. You can do what I've just done with the spot aware, then use the Clonestamp tool to clean it up, or you can use the Clonestamp tool from the very beginning. I'm going to show you the longer version with the Clonestamp tool from the beginning so you understand how that tool can be used properly. So keeping the opacity down at around the 20s, we're going to pick up the source image that's close to where the seagull is, and we're going to start painting over the edge of it. This one is more of a paint tool, so you're kind of using your eye to make sure that you're using the right colour pixels from the surrounding area, and that you're painting over what object is in the way in a way that is more convincing and more believable. Once you get down to where the sand edge is, it makes sense to pick up the source image on the actual sand line right next to where the ocean is. And then when you move over the actual seagull that's in the way, you can align that sand so that you know that once you've started painting from here, you're not going to go over either the ocean or the sand. It's going to remain the same line, which will look more believable. Again, picking up different sample sources so that it doesn't look too similar to itself, and then you create your own version of that harsh line that we saw with the spot healing tool. You do multiple passes over the top of the object. Eventually, you'll start blurring away. This is me starting to speed up now so that you can see the example. Then once you've started getting rid of, and this is me starting to include some shadow in the actual sand so that it looks real, and then we can start using the ocean to get rid of the object that's further up and get rid of more of the body of the seagull. Keep picking up different sample images so that you've got a bigger diversity going on so that it doesn't look as if you're just cloning that one area, because that becomes obvious to the human eye, and we'll start picking that up in terms of photo manipulation, and it'll be obvious to somebody you've done an edit here. You can just keep on introducing the pixels that you think are the more appropriate, bringing those elements in, bringing in different shadows from different parts of the ocean in here. Now, where we come up to the surf, we see that the surf is white up until it peters off and starts fading away at this point. So we want to pick up this same sample set that's from here and then start working over the top of the beak. You can start bringing down the shadow. You can see there that I got too close with the source image, so the beak started to fade in, but the brilliant thing about the opacity is it's not so obvious because it's only at 20%. You can start working and layering over that until that just becomes completely cleared, obscured out. Start bringing in the edge of that surf where that shadow's coming in, and then you can just start finishing off and getting rid of those final details with the ocean. The critical thing with the Clonestamp tool is that you're working with a low opacity so that it starts blending and blurring itself in, and that you use your own eye to bring in the shadows and the details that are going on with the colours and the pixels in the image that you've got, so that it doesn't look too artificial when you've been manufacturing it and manipulating it. By the time then that you zoom out, it becomes a lot less obvious, even when you're looking at something you know has happened, to notice that any manipulation has gone on here. So this way we've got rid of the buoy, the seagull, and the sky looks clear. You've managed to get rid of the artifacts in this image that we don't like, and it's a lot less distracting. That's the end of your first tutorial. Thank you for watching.